Only a few days earlier, political circles and media outlets were still arguing over one question. Would Donald Trump truly go as far as launching another military operation against Iran, or was it all pressure tactics designed to intimidate Tehran? But by this morning, that entire debate had collapsed in dramatic fashion. What happened next felt less like ordinary geopolitical news and more like a freezing wave crashing directly into the confidence of Western intelligence agencies. Iran, the same nation repeatedly portrayed by Western media as weakened, cornered, and suffocating beneath endless sanctions, has now revealed something the world desperately hoped did not exist: operational nuclear weapons. At this moment, silence has spread across the Middle East. Not the tense stillness before combat begins, but the stunned quiet that appears when governments realize reality has changed faster than they expected. Until yesterday, many officials believed the situation remained manageable. Then, emergency intelligence briefings reached the White House. CIA analysts, carrying newly confirmed satellite evidence and classified reports, delivered a message that immediately shook Washington. Iran is allegedly in possession of no fewer than 3 to 5 fully assembled nuclear warheads. And the most disturbing detail was not merely the existence of those weapons. It was the path used to create them. Under relentless sanctions, blocked supply chains, and constant surveillance, Iran should not have possessed the industrial capability required to complete an advanced nuclear weapons program in such a short time frame. That contradiction pushed American intelligence toward an answer that reportedly left Donald Trump and Pentagon leadership deeply alarmed: a covert strategic partnership with North Korea. One side of this alliance possessed decades of nuclear testing experience and missile technology powerful enough to keep Japan and South Korea permanently on edge. Yet Pyongyang suffered from severe shortages of energy resources and desperately needed oil along with foreign currency. The other side, Iran, sat atop enormous petroleum reserves and continued generating income through hidden oil exports, while urgently seeking a deterrent capable of shielding the country from pressure imposed by the United States and Israel. So, according to the claims, a silent bargain emerged. Oil shipments and financial support were allegedly exchanged for nuclear expertise, engineering assistance, and direct involvement from North Korean weapons specialists. No conventional banking systems, no public trade agreements, no visible cargo fleets moving openly across oceans. Instead, the operation supposedly relied on submarines, concealed transport routes, and covert air corridors passing through third-party nations, all designed to avoid detection, while equipment and personnel moved quietly between continents. For years, the entire network allegedly operated beneath the gaze of American satellites and intelligence monitoring systems. Looking back now, the bombing campaign ordered by Trump appears almost painfully ironic. At the time, Washington celebrated the operation as a major success. American aircraft had released 14 massive bombs against Iran's declared nuclear facilities. Officials publicly claimed those strikes had crippled uranium enrichment capacity and pushed Tehran's nuclear ambitions backward by decades. But according to this narrative, the operation targeted little more than an elaborate deception. Iranian intelligence reportedly understood from the beginning that direct confrontation with American military power in open territory would be impossible. Because of that, the visible nuclear infrastructure shown to foreign observers was allegedly designed as bait. Surface facilities became theatrical props intended to absorb incoming attacks, while the actual warhead production program continued elsewhere. The real assembly complexes, according to the claims, had already been transferred far underground inside mountain ranges located in central Iran. Hundreds of meters beneath solid rock, hidden installations supposedly continued operating beyond the reach of even America's most powerful bunker-busting weapons. Inside those underground chambers, North Korean technicians were allegedly assisting Iranian engineers through the final and most difficult stage of development: miniaturizing nuclear warheads so they could fit onto ballistic missile systems such as the Shahab and the Kora ramp. That is where Washington now finds itself trapped inside a nightmare scenario. The philosophy behind America First is suddenly facing its harshest strategic test: attack or stand down. If the United States refuses to act, then in practical terms, Iran becomes accepted as a nuclear power. Overnight, American influence throughout the Middle East could weaken dramatically. Allied nations would begin questioning whether Washington still possesses either the capability or the willingness to defend them. But choosing military action opens an even more dangerous door. Bombing a nation believed to possess nuclear weapons is entirely different from attacking a conventionally armed opponent and then returning home declaring victory. The risk calculation changes instantly. Iran may lack the ability to strike directly at the American mainland because of geographic distance, yet it still possesses multiple alternative targets capable of producing catastrophic consequences. American military installations scattered throughout the Middle East could immediately become nuclear targets. Israel itself could also face direct attack. And once that threshold is crossed, the consequences would no longer remain regional. Entire governments across the globe would begin preparing for economic collapse, military escalation, and the terrifying possibility of radioactive fallout spreading across borders. Washington now stands caught between two brutal realities. On one side lies strategic credibility. On the other sits domestic exhaustion. The American public has grown accustomed to stability, comfort, and relative safety. Meanwhile, the economy continues struggling beneath inflation and rising financial pressure in poorer states. Selling the idea of a massive confrontation against a nuclear-armed opponent would be politically explosive. Public resistance would likely erupt immediately. Demonstrations, internal division, and political turmoil could spread across the country. That helps explain why recent statements coming from the White House have sounded cautious and restrained. Expressions of deep concern, appeals for international involvement, diplomatic language carefully crafted to avoid direct escalation. Compared to past decades, the difference is impossible to ignore. There was once a period when America could rapidly deploy military force against weaker nations without facing existential retaliation. That era now appears to be fading. The numbers alone reveal the scale of the paradox. America's GDP remains around $27 trillion. Iran's economy stands near $400 billion. Yet, despite that overwhelming imbalance, hesitation dominates Washington's calculations, and perhaps nothing demonstrates the terrifying power of nuclear deterrence more clearly than that single fact alone. What value does enormous wealth truly hold when the opposing side appears willing to embrace mutual destruction? At that stage, even the strongest leaders would hesitate before taking another step. And right now, Israel finds itself staring directly into an existential abyss. Recent missile exchanges already exposed how fragile the balance has become. For years, the world listened to endless praise surrounding Israel's Iron Dome defense network, promoted almost like an invincible protective barrier capable of stopping any incoming threat. Yet behind closed doors, even Israeli intelligence circles reportedly acknowledged an uncomfortable reality. The interception rate reached only around 65%, and those targets carried conventional payloads rather than nuclear devices. Now imagine a future scenario far darker than anything seen so far. 100 ballistic missiles launched toward Tel Aviv. 99 are intercepted before impact. Only one survives the defensive screen, just one. But that single missile carries a nuclear warhead. That alone would be enough. There's no requirement for dozens of successful hits. No need for saturation beyond imagination. A single nuclear penetration could transform Israel's limited territory into a devastated radioactive zone for generations. Unlike larger nations, Israel lacks strategic depth. There are no massive interior regions available to relocate millions of civilians. Critical infrastructure cannot simply disappear into distant provinces, hidden safely away from danger. One nuclear detonation over Tel Aviv could effectively mark the destruction of the state itself. Because of that fear, pressure inside Israel has intensified dramatically. Military commanders and security officials are reportedly urging Washington to authorize immediate preemptive action before Iran fully activates and deploys these alleged warheads. Yet the United States remains deeply cautious. Every major power connected to this crisis is now calculating survival first. Economies, political futures, military risks, global trade stability, domestic public opinion, all of it enters the equation before anyone commits to irreversible escalation. Even America's closest allies understand an uncomfortable principle that governs international politics. National interest outweighs everything else when catastrophe becomes possible. No leadership can casually gamble with the lives of millions of civilians while facing the possibility of a regional inferno or perhaps something even larger on a global scale. And in moments like these, leverage becomes more important than raw firepower. That reality explains why China's role has suddenly expanded so rapidly. Beijing has not launched airstrikes. No bombers crossed borders. No missiles were fired. Yet China's influence inside the crisis has grown enormously without engaging in direct combat. The reason is increasingly obvious. Washington may now require Chinese cooperation to prevent worldwide economic panic, stabilize supply chains, calm financial markets, and maintain international diplomatic pressure surrounding Iran. But in geopolitics, assistance is never handed out freely. If the United States seeks Beijing's cooperation, China could demand strategic concessions in return: reduced technology restrictions, softer semiconductor sanctions, lower tariffs placed on Chinese exports. Step by step, without firing a shot, Beijing has strengthened its bargaining position against both Washington and the broader international economic system. To many analysts observing the situation unfold, the entire process resembles a lesson in long-term strategic patience. At the heart of the crisis remains one terrifying uncertainty. Is a peaceful resolution still realistically possible? Right now, the answer appears painfully unclear. The conflict has evolved beyond traditional diplomacy because none of the central players believes retreat is affordable anymore. Iran especially appears to view the situation through the lens of regime survival rather than temporary negotiation tactics. Western officials frequently point toward earlier nuclear agreements and argue that sanctions relief could once again be traded for restrictions on Tehran's atomic program. But from Iran's perspective, trust in such arrangements has been severely damaged by history itself. Iranian leaders often reference examples like Libya and Ukraine when shaping their security doctrine. Libya abandoned ambitions tied to strategic weapons and later witnessed foreign military intervention contribute to the collapse of its government. Ukraine surrendered what had once been the world's third largest nuclear arsenal after receiving security guarantees, only to later experience invasion and destruction. Whether those comparisons are perfectly accurate or not matters less than the psychological impact they create inside Tehran's leadership circles. After enduring decades filled with sanctions, economic pressure, covert sabotage, diplomatic isolation, and repeated external threats, Iran increasingly appears to regard nuclear capability not as a negotiating tool, but as the ultimate guarantee against regime elimination. Under that mindset, expecting Tehran to voluntarily dismantle such a deterrent merely in exchange for temporary sanctions, relief may no longer reflect political reality. Meanwhile, worldwide anxiety has surged to extraordinary levels following recent explosions and intensifying regional confrontations. In response, Donald Trump publicly declared that the United States would temporarily halt additional military operations and provide Iran with a 5-day negotiation window. That announcement instantly triggered fierce reactions across political institutions, financial markets, and social media platforms throughout the world. Critics interpreted the pause as evidence of hesitation. In their eyes, Washington appeared uncertain, lacking strategic clarity and unwilling to commit decisively. Supporters, however, framed the exact same move in completely different terms. According to them, the 5-day period did not signal weakness at all. Instead, they viewed it as deliberate timing. Major powers rarely operate through simple and predictable patterns. Diplomatic pauses, negotiation deadlines, and temporary ceasefires are often integrated into wider strategic campaigns unfolding simultaneously across multiple layers of pressure and preparation. From that perspective, even a brief opening for diplomacy could accomplish several objectives at the same time. That temporary pause serves far more purposes than most people realize. It gives governments time to shape public perception, synchronize responses with allies, reposition military resources, calm nervous financial markets, and prepare political justification in case negotiations eventually collapse. While officials publicly speak about restraint and diplomacy, entirely different activities may continue behind closed doors. Naval task forces reposition quietly. Expeditionary units receive updated orders. Intelligence agencies intensify coordination. Supply chains, fuel reserves, transport logistics, and operational planning continue moving forward without attracting public attention. Modern warfare is no longer defined only by missiles and firepower. Timing matters. Signaling matters. Positioning matters. Psychological pressure matters just as much as military strength itself. Naturally, many of these interpretations remain impossible to independently confirm. A large portion of the theories circulating globally still belongs to the realm of speculation rather than verified fact. Yet those theories continue spreading because international politics increasingly operates inside a blurred space where diplomacy, economics, military posture, and information warfare overlap continuously. Today, every announcement carries hidden meanings. Every deadline triggers multiple interpretations. Every public statement becomes part strategy, part signaling, and part psychological maneuver. No location symbolizes this interconnected crisis more clearly than the Strait of Hormuz. That narrow maritime corridor has once again become the center of global attention because a massive share of worldwide oil exports moves directly through it. Any instability inside that passage immediately sends shockwaves through international energy systems. Even the mere possibility of disruption is enough to push oil prices sharply upward, drive shipping insurance costs through the roof, and shake investor confidence across multiple continents. One military incident in Hormuz could produce economic consequences thousands of miles away within only a few hours. That is why the financial dimension of this confrontation may carry equal importance to the military one. In the modern era, governments no longer separate strategic planning from market behavior. Oil prices, bond yields, inflation expectations, stock indexes, and currency stability now influence political calculations at the very highest levels of power. When energy prices surge, inflationary pressure spreads rapidly throughout the global economy. Rising bond yields tighten financial conditions and increase borrowing costs simultaneously for governments, corporations, and ordinary consumers. Political leaders understand something very clearly. A military escalation capable of destabilizing markets can quickly evolve into a domestic economic crisis. Viewed from that angle, pauses in military operations are not simply diplomatic gestures. They also function as tools of economic stabilization. Even limited de-escalation can reduce panic, slow capital flight, and calm volatile financial systems before fear spirals out of control. Timing becomes critically important. Analysts frequently observe how governments often align major political announcements or negotiation deadlines with weekends or periods when markets remain closed. That strategy creates a temporary buffer before the next worldwide trading cycle begins. Whether deliberate or coincidental, these patterns continue feeding the belief that modern geopolitical strategy is now deeply connected to financial engineering and market psychology. Taken together, the crisis reveals a world where diplomacy, military readiness, economic stability, and information warfare have fused into one interconnected global structure. Every decision now affects multiple domains simultaneously. Every escalation carries military danger, financial danger, political danger, and psychological danger all at the same time. Still, separating confirmed reality from dramatic speculation remains extremely important. Geopolitical tensions absolutely influence financial markets. Financial markets absolutely influence political leadership and strategic decision-making. But the more explosive theories surrounding hidden operational schedules, synchronized war planning, or elaborate 5-day master strategies remain interpretations rather than proven facts. During periods of worldwide uncertainty, speculation almost always travels faster than verified information. Yet one conclusion appears increasingly difficult to deny. The strategic balance across the Middle East has fundamentally shifted. Many of the old assumptions that once governed regional power dynamics no longer feel reliable. The era when major powers could launch military operations across the region without triggering major global economic fallout may be approaching its end. Now every confrontation risks setting off worldwide financial instability, energy disruptions, cyber escalation, and potentially catastrophic geopolitical consequences. Israel faces security fears unlike anything experienced in recent decades. Iran appears more determined than ever to secure lasting deterrence capabilities. Meanwhile, the United States struggles to maintain military credibility while simultaneously protecting economic stability and managing growing public exhaustion after decades of conflict. China, on the other hand, continues expanding influence through a completely different model. Not through direct military confrontation, but through patience, economic leverage, strategic positioning, and calculated diplomacy. The coming days may determine far more than whether negotiations succeed or fail. They may reveal whether the traditional rules governing international power still function inside a rapidly transforming world, or whether humanity is entering a far more unstable age shaped by nuclear brinkmanship, economic warfare, fractured alliances, and permanent geopolitical uncertainty. At this moment, no nation possesses a flawless answer. No world leader can fully predict or control the consequences once escalation truly begins. And perhaps the most disturbing reality of all is this: the pauses, the waiting, the silence between major decisions, the uncertainty hanging over every announcement. Those quiet moments may already be the loudest warning the modern world has heard in decades. If you believe global politics is entering a dangerous new chapter, stay with us for the next analysis as we continue following every major shift shaping the future of international power.